Thank you for your attention. Well, let's get straight into our next fantastic speaker, and haven't we been so privileged with our speakers already today? Our next speaker, who I'd like to welcome to the stage, is Dr. Ayesha Khanna. Dr. Ayesha Khanna is the co-founder and CEO of ADO AI, an artificial intelligence solutions firm and incubator. She's been a strategic advisor on AI, smart cities, and fintech to leading corporations and governments. She also serves on the board of Infocom Media Development Authority, IMDA, the Singapore government's agency that develops its world-class technology sector to drive the country's digital economy. Prior to founding ADO AI, Ayesha spent more than a decade on Wall Street developing large-scale trading, risk management, and data analytics systems. Don't forget, you can put some questions through to Slido because we will be taking questions at the end of her presentation. In the meantime, please give a huge round of applause for Dr. Ayesha Khanna.
Hello, everyone. There's a lot of buzz about AI. A lot of people throwing words around on automation. Is it going to take over our jobs? Is it going to save our lives? I want to talk about automation today, about AI today, but I don't want to start with the technology, because that's usually the wrong way to start. I want to start with this guy. So this is President Barack Obama. He was at Harvard Law School, not a whole many years before I was an undergraduate there. And here he is in the law school library against an enormous amount of books. And we can imagine, right, between all of us, what he must have studied there. He probably studied a lot of books like this: constitutional law, torts, taxes. But what if President Obama decided to go back to law school tomorrow? What do you think he would be studying now? Well, I bet one of the things he'd study is this AI-enabled platform called Ravel. And here's what Ravel does. Ravel is able to go through all the cases that have happened in the United States and find interesting correlations between them. Who was the jury? What were the arguments? What was the decision that was taken? What were other cases related to it? And if you've been to law school or know anybody who has, you know that when you graduate from law school, such as Harvard Law School, you graduate, you are hired by a very well-known New York-based law firm. They pay you about $150,000, and the first thing the partner does is, here's a case, go find me everything that ever happened in similar cases. Find me precedents. Now, there are two issues with that. One, the law student who's been studying constitutional law and is excited to get into the real world isn't that excited about this grunt work. And secondly, Ravel can do it for him for $250 a month. Never sleeps, never is in a bad mood. And so this is now the kind of automation that we're seeing across all fields. And law schools are not behind. This is not just me noticing this. Law schools in the US are changing their courses now. A friend of mine teaches at Yale Law School, and she said, Ayesha, you wouldn't believe the most popular course at Yale Law School for first-year students is robots and AI. Now, Harvard Law School, not to be left behind, has started something called the Case Law Access Project. And it has begun to digitize all of the many, many cases since the 1600s in the US right to the present, in partnership with Ravel. And it recently posted 360 years of US case law. It's a new field called computational law. And the idea is that all students, all lawyers, associates, anybody can go in and find information. on law. Even people who are in prison, sometimes unjustly put over there, can also log in, and it's available for free. This is an essential tool for lawyers in the future. And it's very, very important for us to understand that this is what automation is. This is not automation. This is a very sexy media story that came out and said that a law firm hired its first AI lawyer, and his name was Ross. And everybody got really worried that Ross was going to replace all the existing lawyers. What is Ross? Does Ross have coffee with his clients? Does he empathize? Can he understand? Can he connect the dots between cases? No. Actually, Ross does pretty much what Ravel does. He finds what AI and data are very good at, mining huge amounts of data and giving insights to support humans. And it's very important that human input is still part of the equation. So yes, we do need lawyers, but we don't need lawyers to be trained the way they were and to work the way they were. We want them to focus on what they went to school for, to think. And we need them to understand how to work with machines. I go in every day. I run an enterprise AI solutions company. And some of the largest telcos, transport companies, retailers, banks are our clients. And we see that this is essentially how automation works. Now, governments are using it as well, not just companies. And of course, in New Zealand, the whole world was shaken up by what happened and by the empathy and leadership that New Zealand citizens and its prime minister showed. New Zealand has almost 5 million people. China has 1 billion people. Looking for criminals for China can sometimes be like looking for a needle in an extremely large haystack. Every country has its own way of dealing with security. In China, they're looking at smart policing. Now you can see this woman. She has something unusual. Can you see? It's in her glasses. You can see they're a bit different. That's because there's computer recognition software in there. It's actually powered by a company called SenseTime that's now worth $4.5 billion. And SenseTime works with a lot of the provincial police stations to recognize and identify criminals who are in the database of these police stations. And China has 176 million surveillance cameras now. The Chinese government not only uses this information, but also provides SenseTime data also. So the next time you go to China and you're going down the subway or the MRT, there may be a SenseTime camera looking at you, or there may be police officers on the street that have those special goggles. Sometimes you can't see people. You can't see their faces. That's why it's called facial recognition. But now there's another company called Watrix. And what Watrix does is it recognizes you by your gait. Over 50 meters away, it can see how you're working and your signature of your gait, and it can recognize you. And according to China, it has more than 300,000 criminals wanted in China, and many of these are in the database. So this is one way that you can deal with it. Here you see people who are not facing the camera. This is how Watrix looks at it. It looks at their gait, it quickly analyzes it, and then finds the person it's related to. Not everybody wants this in their country. This is something each country needs to decide on. There are many issues related to privacy, data protection, And then AI is also not infallible. We know that Facebook used artificial intelligence, but it failed to detect the shooting video, according to them. And we also know that there may be people who may be tagged inappropriately. Have you ever been stopped at the airport because your name resembled that of somebody in their database? I have, over 20 years ago, but it was pretty scary. So I think it's very, very important for us to look at the benefits, but then also think about the risks and have the regulation and have the safety nets for those and have human input in how we make the final decision on anything. But of course, when you look at these kinds of statistics, it's scary. And as a mom, I feel quite strongly now about security. When I was young and rebellious, I was not so concerned. Now, here's the thing. All of us are sitting over here, and we all want to be innovative in the companies we're in or the government agencies we're in. But to be honest, if you don't know about new technologies like AI, like VR, like IoT, all of these acronyms and buzzwords, actually, there's a reason you need to know about them, because otherwise, how will you innovate? Innovation today is driven and made possible by many of these technologies. I'll give you an example. Did you know that 5 people are joining the middle class every second in the world? It's actually a wonderful thing that more people are now getting more access to education, healthcare, even better food. They want to eat meat, for example. But in the developing world, there are issues with food safety. I'm going to give you an example from China, but this could be in Africa, this could be in any country in Asia, Latin America. Now, in China, there were 500,000 food safety violations in 9 months. This is a problem. How can you trust the food that you're eating? Let's make it more specific. Let's say you decided to invite some folks over for dinner or to have a nice meal with your children or grandchildren. It so happened that you're in a 2nd or 3rd tier city in China. And you decide to go out to the grocery store and cook your favorite recipe of chicken roast or whatever the specialty is in New Zealand. And you go and pick up this chicken breast wrapped in cellophane, and it says it's organic chicken. But is it really? Is it really chicken? Is it really organic? Is it free range? You don't really know that. And one company realized that somebody is willing to pay a bit of money to know that. Because it's a business problem that can be solved with some technology. As a mom, I would be willing to pay a little bit more money to make sure that was healthy chicken, that it was actually running around freely and not cooped up in cages. That company is Yong'an. And here's what it decided. It said, we're going to put little sensors on the anklets of 23 million chickens so that we know if they're running around or if they're cooped up. We are going to use the same kind of facial recognition technology that the police uses, but we're going to use it to make sure it's the same chicken that it's supposed to be, that it's healthy. And this way, we are going to then put all this information on the blockchain. Because remember, corruption is rampant around the world. And if you find out that it's a chicken that's free range, somebody else can go in and tamper with it. But on the blockchain, nobody can tamper with it. That's the beauty of that technology, even though it's in early days. So if you put it all from the moment it was born to the time that it reaches the grocery store, well, then you can rest assured, and for that, you're willing to pay some money. Now, if somebody in that company did not know, the chicken farmers did not know about computer vision, they did not know about Internet of Things, they did not know about blockchain, this solution would not occur to them. Now it's been covered all over the news, 100,000 chickens are already happily running around, and it's called Go Chicken, the device that they use, and it is now also doing its facial recognition technology. And at the end of the day, why do we do all this? I meet many CEOs, they say, Ayesha, let's do some AI. And I say, why? Why do you want to do it? At the end of the day, we need to find the reason to use it, otherwise, let's not use it. And the reason here was a pain point and a mother's desire to feed her children healthy food. And lest you think that this is only a Chinese or Bangladeshi or Nigerian problem, let me tell you, food safety is a global problem. Walmart is now using blockchain because last year there was this huge E. coli outbreak in lettuce that was causing people diarrhea, nausea, a lot of stomach problems. And so now they are also using that in the US. And it's actually one of IBM's big success stories, sample success stories on blockchain. So for innovation, it's easier when you can leverage all of this power that these technologies are providing you. Again, it takes a human to think about it, but it actually takes humans plus machines to come up with it. Now, I'm saying all this. I'm clearly biased. I run an AI company. But I can tell you one thing, if you don't move fast, then someone you didn't expect is going to come after you. After your business, your agency, your job. And I think one of the good ways to think about this is to think about a question. Here's my question. Why is a Norwegian telco buying a bank in Pakistan? There's so many strange pairs of words we don't expect. Norwegian and Pakistan, telco and bank. Well, you know, Pakistan has 206 million people. Can you guess how many of them have a mortgage with a bank? 50,000. It's an incredibly big opportunity for any bank, for any fintech. It's a dream scenario. But yet, all the banks were, nah, it's okay, our business is going pretty well. You know, we're making money, CEOs buying cars, it's all going well. But this company, Telenor, noticed an opportunity because they were seeing usage. People were buying mobile phones, and they said, you know what, we'll allow them to pay via their mobile phone. They could pay their utility bill. Doesn't matter if they have a bank account or not. They could top up and pay for pharmaceuticals. They could pay for a Diet Coke. And they began to notice more and more people were using these micro payments through their phone. And they said, you know what? That's the opportunity. We're going to become a bank as well. This was a huge deal. And this is the man that I met 1 year ago in Norway. He's the CEO of Telenor. I was having dinner with him, and I was really surprised how he thought of his telco company as really a data-driven digital company. Safkej said to me, I see huge potential in Asia in financial services. And I thought that was so interesting that this head of a telecommunications firm in Oslo is telling me so many miles away lies a huge opportunity in banking. And he did that. He bought the bank that same year. And after that, when China's Ant Financial, which saw the huge opportunity in Pakistan, said, we're going to go in. Did they partner with Pakistan's biggest bank? No. They partnered with Telenor, a Norwegian telco in Pakistan. Now, many of the banks have also now been motivated by Telenor and other incumbents to come in, but they were surprised because they were only looking at other banks, and they were only looking at small fintechs, and they thought, we have time. And it took them by surprise when a telco came in to eat their lunch. Now, ASEAN has 622 million people. Over 69% of adults in Southeast Asia don't have a bank account. So Telenor has actually sold its Eastern European operations altogether to focus mainly on Asia. And the key to all of this is using data. If I know how you're using your mobile phone, who are you calling, your browsing history, where are you moving, then all of this information helps me assess your credit risk. This is information the bank doesn't have. The bank depends on other things like your credit card transactions or anything that your parents may have given you or your education, all of which are not always available to the poorer, lower middle classes of Asia. Now again, same questions. These poor people are willing to give their data. Maybe you or I would not. But again, this is the world we live in, where data fundamentally is used to give people access to new things, but also we must deal with what it takes away, which is our information. Now, to have this kind of sustainable and equitable growth, we need to nurture our talent. That's really important. How do you guide and empower people to understand what I just spoke to you about? There are two ways to kind of deal with this, by the way. One is that AI is kind of a movie that I go and watch. It's a black box. I don't understand it. And the other is, no, I want to understand a little bit because every single thing I do or my children do is going to be impacted by it. Well, there's one country that's obsessed with the question of talent, and that country is Singapore. Because you see, in Singapore, we don't have a lot of commodities, a lot of natural resources. The most important thing we have in Singapore are our people. And so when the Deputy Prime Minister said, what if jobs and skills have an expiry date to all the citizens of Singapore? We had to sit up and take notice. That's a pretty serious thing to do, to say. And if you, like me, you spent 7 years doing your PhD, that's not a nice thing to hear, that you're still more learning to do. But you know, he had a point, because Singapore was seeing disruption in everything that it stood for. For example, Singapore is one of the financial services capitals of the world. We compete with Hong Kong, London, Tokyo, New York. But we know that technology is disrupting financial services as we know it. We know that, according to some estimates, 30 to 50% of banking jobs will be gone because of automation. That doesn't mean the bankers need to go away, but their jobs will not remain the same. And so Singapore had a choice. It said, well, if fintech is the new banking, we want to be the fintech capital of the world. But how should we do that? Either we can kind of hope this blows over, kind of put our head in the sand like an ostrich, or we can take the bull by the horns and disrupt ourselves. By the way, that's really easier said than done. A lot of consultants do design thinking workshops and love to talk about disruption, but it's a really hard thing to do. And Singapore had to do it. It started to invite a lot of people in. It started to invite fintech companies, artificial intelligence companies, and it had a three-pronged strategy. Number one, it decided to do it under the regulatory framework of the Monetary Authority of Singapore. You have to be safe. You have to look at the implications. Whenever you let a new technology out, you have to look at the implications for the country. But you don't want to strangle innovation, so it started putting out sandboxes. And this is the same Deputy Prime Minister in the middle, wearing a blue T-shirt, a shirt, and then on the far right, it had a chief fintech officer. Now they have the largest fintech festival in the world. And here's what they said. They said, we are going to fast-track approval so that we encourage our entrepreneurs to actually use new technology. But even though it's fast-tracked, we'll assess the risk. You'll deploy it in actually a sandbox. We'll test it with a beta set of users. And only then, once it's in a position to be launched, will we launch it. I was just in Europe, in Stockholm, recently. And a lot of people in Europe often say there's too much regulation. To be honest, I do believe in regulation for new technologies. It is important because we need to protect ourselves from the downside. But on the other hand, I like Singapore's model because it also encourages innovation. And of course, we have the same kind of things in companies as well. Here is Policy Pal. The woman in the middle, her name is Val. She's now 30 under 30 in Forbes. She's done extremely well. I remember when she just had an idea, and she came to speak to me over coffee, and she was very nervous. But the last place she expected to get support from, perhaps, was the government. But they gave her a sandbox, they gave her support, and she was one of the first to graduate from the sandbox and then went on to earn money and to raise funding. So I think this is really important to have this balance between regulatory oversight and innovation. The second thing, you emphasize safety first. I can't emphasize this enough. I think it must be because I'm much older now, and I have a lot of young people working in my firm, and they're all very excited to work with AI. But it's constantly my co-founder and I are putting in kind of risk management around them, and we're training them on the importance of doing this, but doing it in a careful way. First, cybersecurity. With 5G coming, and more than ever before, and if you know, 3G, we were able to have social media, and 4G, and we are able to watch Netflix. 5G, we can quickly download movies very, very quickly in a matter of seconds. And we'll finally be able to connect over a billion sensors around the world in what is called the Internet of Things. But this also means when everything's connected, you need to think about cybersecurity. And then you need to think about data protection as well. You should have a right to your information. It should be easy for you to understand how a company is using your information. And if you feel truly comfortable as a society or a nation, and your government decides with your support that it will allow certain things, well, that's good. If it doesn't allow certain things, that's also good, but you must come to these decisions after active debate. And finally, Singapore set up the world's first Council for Artificial Intelligence and Ethics. And at the World Economic Forum in Singapore, the minister put down a framework to guide companies to have an ethical approach to data governance and AI governance. It's not mandatory, but it's a good start. A lot of people ask me, are you afraid that AI will become smarter than us? No, not right now. But I am afraid that people who have malevolent intent will be able to manipulate us with AI. For example, the same technique that actually generates more data for AI and is able to help detect cancer earlier in radiology reports also allows AI to mimic human beings. So for example, if one of you had this particular Chinese software, you could record my voice for just 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. And then you could literally call anybody who knows me and program me to say anything. You could call my mother-in-law, you could call my clients, you could call YouTube, you could put me there. And this kind of fake news is a real concern. Now, you don't want to stop the software, right? Because have you ever seen the fear of somebody who's waiting to hear their cancer prognosis? You want to be able to help them, but you also want to be able to avoid having people manipulate human beings. And therein lies the dilemma for all technologies. And that's why we need to have ethics and safety first. For the common man, it's a bit difficult to understand AI. And that's because so many computations are happening. And GDPR, which is the Global Data Regulation Act, is actually trying to put accountability and transparency of AI into the very regulation of the entire EU. And for example, my company, we are GDPR compliant. Anybody who touches the data of a European Union citizen has to comply. And that means that eventually they have to explain their algorithms. If an algorithm made a decision that significantly affected your life, you have the right to ask, how was that decision made? And I think that's really good to have that kind of transparency. And I think a lot more people will begin to follow GDPR in various versions. Now, here's the final thing. Your expertise matters. My expertise matters. Each one of us has developed expertise. But where both you and I lack is your ability to work with people like me and my ability to work with people like you. No job now does not have or will not have somebody related to data and AI as part of a team. And no AI engineer such as myself can go into any business or company and try to change it with AI without understanding the domain. This is really, really important because what I've done right now is I've said this AI thing is not about just my domain. It's your responsibility, your opportunity, and your problem. Now, in Singapore, this is not the government's image. I chose this image. And I always say that's me in the middle. But the idea really is that that's what Singapore is trying to say, right? And that's what I really believe in. Every team is a team of interdisciplinary superheroes. Each of us matters. And each of us needs to know a little about the other. Otherwise, how will we build this new digital economy that's powered by new demographics, new technologies, new risks? Now, in Singapore, the government said, we have invited this sandbox, these fintech companies. What's going to happen to the bankers? We don't want to lose them. They're important to us. You know what? We're going to train them in how to partner with AI, and we're going to give them a little bit of training on what AI is. So they subsidize these courses, and this is one of them. A lot of banks are signing up. And this is one course. You're going to see a lot more courses like this. This is called AI in Finance. I'm one of 4 senior lecturers. The others are far smarter and better than me. And the idea is, I'm not going to teach you AI. I'm going to teach you AI that's relevant to you with data, opportunities that you understand. And so when that banker comes out, he's ready. He's marketable for life because now he knows how to work with AI engineers, data scientists, UX designers sociologists, and build the new financial services for that emerging middle class that I had mentioned before. And Singapore went beyond that. It said, here's $500 to everybody. Take it. Did they force all of us to take robotics courses? No. They said, take whatever you want. In fact, mooncake baking course is very popular. And the reason is because they understood that people only succeed and find meaning in work when they have a passion for it. But it is inevitable that no matter what you do, whether you're a lawyer, an entertainer, a baker, a banker, you will run into the need for data and AI. And at that point, you should know where to find that person, and you should know just enough so that you can do two things. Number one, you're open to their ideas, because both AI engineers and the machines they built can give us innovative insights. But two, you are empowered and confident to question their biases and to probe and make sure that it truly does reflect the values of your company. So I hope and encourage all of you, no matter what your age, gender, whatever you've studied, art, music, no excuse for anyone not to learn a little bit of AI. It's super fun. I know I'm biased, but it's super fun. It's interesting. At least sign up for some of the magazines and newsletters that just keep you in the loop of all the interesting things that are happening with emerging technologies so that you can recognize it and feel empowered to be part of this AI-powered economy in which we're going. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's fantastic. We've got quite a few questions too, so all right. Well, the first one we've got here is, how do you avoid bias and discrimination when using AI?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The majority of bias and discrimination comes from poor data that you put in. So there are many examples in which, for example, there was this instance when a lot of the images that Google was tagging as male or female, the software was built by a number of young white men who were graduates of Stanford, et cetera, and they were using their own faces to train the algorithm. And then one day, an African-American woman put her picture there, and it tagged it as a gorilla, which was horrifying for everybody, including Google, that immediately took it down. So garbage in, garbage out. The data that you put in is very important, but also the oversight. So my co-founder's PhD is in bias and artificial intelligence. And so in that case, it's very important to also have, there are certain ways that you can inspect your algorithm to make sure it's not biased. And I'd just like to add, it's very important to have diversity in your teams. If you have women, minorities, all ages, they will notice this before it hits the market.
And is that something you're constantly updating? You're constantly improving on in terms of bias?
Yes, absolutely. So there are certain ways that you're always looking at it. There are certain, actually, algorithmic techniques to inspect it. But it's also something that you put governance around it. So as we know, technology is people, processes, and the technology. So you train your people. We have classes around governance, looking out for bias. This is very, very important. And it's an ongoing, constant process.
Fantastic. Okay, what else have we got here? What jobs do you think will no longer exist in 10 years' time?
I think we see a lot of jobs in truck drivers, taxi drivers, with the advent of autonomous vehicles. Of course, anything to do with customer service that can be automated. The Philippines, for example, a large part of their business comes from business process outsourcing and call centers. And you wouldn't believe how many CEOs of top companies in the Philippines tell me it's their KPI to replace call center agents with chatbots by up to 70%. So these are just basic, some of the things. Of course, the nature of all jobs will change. But also, for instance, bank managers, branch managers. In Singapore, there is now a robot being tested at one of the Prudential offices to provide customer service as well. So anything that requires, here's the way I think about it, anything that requires information that has to be given, as opposed to more thinking, abstraction, creativity, that thing is most likely to be automated.
What about newsreaders?
I'm not going to say anything.
Excellent. What do you think is the biggest risk with AI?
The biggest risk is it falling into the wrong hands and then being used to manipulate human beings, and we saw a lot of that with fake news. But even as we go more into the future with genetic programming and other kinds of things that are related to healthcare and our biology, I see that as a big risk. Of course, with AI, of course, you could have more weaponry as well. All of these things are possible with any new technology. So therefore, the governance and regulation needs to be there. The risk is in the human beings behind the AI. I would say not so much in the AI itself.
As you said before, garbage in, garbage out, yeah? Okay. New Zealand is a country of small businesses. How can AI and data mining help at their scale?
This is a really, really good question. So in Singapore, 70% of companies are small, medium enterprises. And so a large part of what the government is trying to do is democratize access to the cloud and AI software so that these companies, even though they don't have expertise, are able to use this software. So the best thing the government can do is to provide subsidized cloud and provide them the skills and help they need to get themselves up on the cloud and get access to some of this predictive forecasting, demand forecasting, other kinds of software. And then they'll be using AI automatically without needing to have to build it in-house, which only most large companies can do.
A similar kind of vein, I guess. How do we balance this growing technological space with the fact that some places in New Zealand still don't have access to cell service and limited internet provider options?
This is an issue in a lot of the developing world as well. I actually think this kind of infrastructure is like a fundamental human right now, not only because of the fact that it connects us to each other, but at least in poorer parts of the world, people are using that now to educate themselves and also to earn a living through digital work. So I would really advocate as a citizen for more access and to democratize access to telecommunications and internet and related infrastructure for all people in your country.
My 16-year-old daughter told me the other night her access to Wi-Fi was a human right.
Yes, I agree. Smart girl.
What about AI in our homes? Is this a good idea?
It depends on what you mean by AI in your homes. It's already in your phone, so you're carrying it around with you. If you mean like a Google Home or an Alexa, which is what a lot of people think of when they think of AI, we had Google Home for a bit, and then we stopped using it after the kids got sick of it. But I think that we will have these little robotic assistants. They will become smarter. We will be able to speak to them. It is a fact that the data will be then used by the company. And I did feel uncomfortable at times, even though Google and others say, Alexa, Amazon, they all say they're not listening. It's human nature to be wary after some of the things that we've read about. But it's inevitable. And by the way, it's going to happen so subtly. Just like I said, we have so many devices in our homes. They're full of AI. Facebook, Google, Netflix, they're all using AI. It's already in our homes. It's in our pockets. It's just a matter of more awareness, more discussion, more debate, and then kind of almost activism to prevent it from using it for means that we don't want it to be used for.
You talked earlier about keeping abreast of what's going on with magazines, newsletters, that kind of thing. How would you recommend that people keep informed? Is there anything specifically that you think they should be looking at?
Yeah, so I think you can sign up for a couple of things. One is a lot of magazines have newsletters. There is Axios, A-X-I-O-S. It's in Silicon Valley. You can just sign up for their newsletters, and they tell you the latest news in the industry you're interested in. You can sign up for TechCrunch. So what TechCrunch does is it tells you the interesting things that are happening and what startups are getting funded. Again, you're trying to understand how these technologies are being used to address business problems. So when you read that, I just scroll through it. It gives me a lot of ideas. And of course, there's, for those who are like a little bit more geeky, there's Technology Review by MIT, which is fantastic. And then for those focused on Asia, there's Tech in Asia, which covers a lot of ASEAN and Chinese and Indian tech companies as well. I think that's a great way without killing yourself. Like, I love taking Coursera courses, but you don't have to learn AI. You can just know generally what's happening enough so that you recognize potential, and you're not like, the thing that I always try to do, I have a charity that teaches girls coding and AI. I just feel really bad when people start talking about something very technical and you just lose your confidence a little bit. You can just see people like, okay, they must know what they're talking about. We don't know what we're talking about. We know the technique, but we need the business people's input. And that's the way it goes both ways.
Got time for just a couple of other questions, and this one flows on quite well from that. Traditional teaching in school must surely be redundant. The problem will take years to resolve. What are your thoughts there?
Yes, I think that we are not educating our children properly. The schooling system all over the world is broken. And we really need to figure out what to do. So there's, in Finland and Estonia, now in Singapore, they're also trying, but it was really built for the industrial age. The parents had to go to the factory. That's why you had 9 to 5. The children had to be put somewhere in school. Now it should be much more project-based. In my opinion, learning the basics of coding is as important as reading, writing, or knowing math. It would be horrendous if a teacher came to us tomorrow and said, yeah, I'm not going to teach your kid how to read. We'd be horrified. And in the same way, I can guarantee you, like 10 years from now, a mother would be horrified if somebody said, I'm not going to teach your kids the basics of coding. How else will you intuitively understand or make sense of a world that is so enmeshed with technology? So I think that for parents, then it falls to us. So there's code.org, there are lots of forums out there. I also go to them, and that's how I get my kids involved.
Fantastic. One final question. I think this is quite a good one to end with, and certainly one we're seeing at the moment. How can regulatory systems catch up and then keep up with AI and other emerging technologies?
One of the first things regulatory systems can do is to have regulation and panels that are just not made up of lawyers and politicians, which is often the case. So one of the reasons why we stay behind is because we don't invite the technical experts to be on those committees. And so it's very important. And also, frankly, we need to maybe invite some philosophers to it as well. It's a big question. It's a new rewiring of our social contract. One of the most thoughtful people on AI and its impact is actually Nick Bostrom, who's a professor of philosophy at Oxford University. I think that those are the kind, we need to change, we need to make everything more interdisciplinary. Will it catch up? Maybe, but it's a constant fight between good and evil, as in all technologies that we see. So we have to keep trying. And the first step is to get the experts at the table so that they can truly inform about not only what's happening right now, but because change is happening so fast, what's around the corner.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Dr.
Thank
Ayesha
you.
Khanna. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.